Imagine you did everything the adults told you to do. You finished school, got the job, opened the savings app, skipped vacations, cooked at home, and still the cheapest decent house looks like it belongs to a different species of buyer. That is the part that drives Gen Z insane. It is not just that houses are expensive. It is that the old script still gets repeated, even after the math stopped working. Buyers in 2026 are looking at a market where a new house has recently been around $425,000, and a 30-year mortgage has been sitting around 6.5%. That combination does not feel like a normal price tag. It feels like a locked door, and when people say just save harder, they are usually describing a world that no longer exists, because the real problem is not one villain. It is what happens when the price is already high. The mortgage rate makes that price feel heavier. Rent keeps draining the down payment, wages struggle to catch up, debt gets counted against you, investors compete for the same starter homes. Local rules make building slow, older owners stay locked into cheap mortgages, and the whole market rewards people who already had assets before the race even started. This is why Gen Z cannot afford houses. Start with the price of the house itself. For older generations, the first home was often ugly, small, inconvenient, and still possible. It might have needed carpet, a weird kitchen, and a heroic tolerance for wood paneling. But it existed as a rung on the ladder. Today, that rung is missing in a lot of cities. The homes that should be starter homes often got bought years ago. Some became rentals. Some got renovated until they were no longer starter homes at all. And a lot of them simply never got built. Builders often make more money on larger houses because the land, the permits, the labor, and the financing are expensive before the first wall even goes up. So the market keeps producing homes that look good on a brochure, while first-time buyers are begging for something smaller, cheaper, and less perfect. Then interest rates turn the problem from painful into absurd. A house price is only the sticker. The monthly payment is where reality lives. When mortgage rates were near 3%, a buyer could stretch into a higher price and still survive the monthly payment. At 6.5%, the same house becomes a different financial object. The payment jumps. The interest bill explodes. The bank is not just asking whether you can buy the house. It is asking whether you can carry a second invisible house made entirely out of interest. That is why people feel like they are chasing a moving target. They save $10,000 and the monthly payment moves away anyway. Now add rent. Rent is not just a bill, rent is the down payment leak. Every month, money that could have become ownership goes to keeping a roof overhead right now. That is not a moral failure. People need somewhere to live, but it means the person trying to buy a house is often paying the market they are trying to escape. This is the trap. The longer you rent, the harder it can be to save. But the harder it is to save, the longer you rent. People love to talk about coffee, takeout, and subscriptions because those are visible little choices. But the real budget killer is the giant fixed cost that resets every month before your ambition gets a vote. Wages are the next part of the stack. Gen Z is not allergic to work. A lot of them are picking up extra jobs, building side income, freelancing, taking contract work, and learning money earlier than their parents had to. The problem is that a paycheck now has to beat the housing market while also surviving healthcare, transportation, taxes, debt payments, and inflation. Getting a raise helps. But if the house price moved first, then the mortgage payment moved, then insurance and property tax moved, and then the basic cost of living moved too, the raise often feels like catching a train after it already left. This is why the argument gets so heated. One side says, I bought my first house at your age. The other side says, okay, but run those same numbers with what houses cost now, what rent costs now, what rates are now, and what my paycheck actually is. Those are not the same sentence. Then there is debt. Student debt is not the whole story, but it is a heavy part of it for many buyers. A monthly debt payment can reduce how much mortgage a lender approves. It can delay saving. It can make someone choose between emergency savings and a down payment. It can turn every major life decision into a spreadsheet that says, not yet. And even for Gen Z members without student loans, the market still punishes anyone who starts without family help. That is one of the quietest divides in housing. Some people are saving from zero. Other people are saving with a family boost already under them. Maybe college was covered. Maybe they can live at home without paying rent. Maybe the down payment comes partly as a gift, or a parent can co-sign, or an inheritance shows up at the exact moment it matters. None of that makes someone bad, but it changes the race completely. Two people can have the same job, same salary, same discipline, and totally different housing outcomes because one started with a cushion and the other started with a bill. That is how homeownership becomes less like a reward for hard work and more like a relay race. If the previous generation hands you equity, you start closer to the finish line. If they hand you nothing, you start behind the stadium. Now look at the sellers. Millions of current homeowners have very low mortgage rates from the old world. If they sell, they may have to buy again at a much higher rate. So they stay put. That makes sense for them. But when enough people do it, fewer homes hit the market. This is called a lock-in effect, but it feels simpler than that. The houses are occupied by people who would move if moving did not punish them. Low supply keeps pressure on prices. High rates keep pressure on payments. The buyer gets squeezed from both sides. Then investors enter the picture. Most homes are still bought by regular people, but investors matter because they can change the feeling of a local market. A first-time buyer has to worry about inspections, financing, the appraisal, the timing, and the fear of making the biggest mistake of their life. An investor can sometimes show up with cash, move fast, and treat the whole thing like a spreadsheet. When starter homes become rental assets, the buyer is no longer just competing with another family. They are competing with a business model, and the business model does not need to imagine birthdays in the backyard. It only needs the rent to clear. Zoning and local rules add another layer. In many desirable places, it is difficult to build enough housing where people actually need to live. Cities say they want affordability, but then they block density. They slow down permits. They fight apartments. They make small lots hard. They preserve neighborhoods as if the current map was handed down from the sky. The result is predictable. More people want in than the city allows room for. Scarcity becomes policy. Policy becomes price. This is the part that makes housing different from a normal product. If phones get expensive, companies can make more phones. If a city refuses to allow enough homes, demand does not disappear. It just bids against itself until ordinary people lose. So Gen Z sees a strange contradiction. They are told to move where opportunity is. Then the opportunity cities are too expensive. They are told to move somewhere cheaper. Then the cheaper place may have fewer jobs, weaker transit, lower wages, or fewer social ties. They are told to buy small, but the small homes are scarce. They are told to be patient. But waiting can mean higher prices, higher rent, or another year where wealth grows for owners while non-owners stand outside the asset machine. This is why the psychological side matters. A house is not just shelter in America. It is where people are told to store their savings, build their retirement, prove they are moving forward, protect themselves from inflation, and finally point to something and say, "I made it." So when Gen Z cannot buy, it does not just feel like missing a consumer purchase. It feels like being locked out of adulthood. That is also why the conversation gets mean. Older people hear criticism of the housing market as criticism of their own choices. Younger people hear advice from homeowners as a lecture from people who won the easier version of the game. Everybody gets defensive because everybody is protecting a story about fairness. But the math does not care about the story. The math says a buyer needs enough income, enough savings, decent credit, room for debt, an actual house to buy, and a monthly payment they can survive. If any one of those breaks, the dream gets delayed. If all of them tighten at once, the dream starts to look fake. So what would actually help? It would help to build more housing where the jobs actually are. It would help to make starter homes legal and profitable again, speed up permits, allow small multifamily housing, and build better transit so cheaper areas do not become isolation traps. It would help to cool down speculation in the most vulnerable parts of the market, raise wages closer to the real cost of living, stop debt systems from kneecapping people before they build assets, and quit pretending every housing failure is a personal budgeting flaw. There is no magic fix because the crisis was not created by one switch, but there is a clear truth: Gen Z is not failing because they forgot how to work. They are trying to buy into a market where the entrance fee rose faster than the starter pack. Some will still make it. They might buy with partners, move to a cheaper market, get family help, house hack, buy a condo, wait out rates, or build income online. But the fact that a few people can escape a trap does not prove the trap is imaginary. The old promise was simple: work hard, save money, buy a place, and build a life. For Gen Z, every word in that promise got more expensive. And until housing becomes something people can actually enter again, the question will not be why young people are delaying adulthood. The question will be how long a country can keep calling it adulthood when the front door costs $500,000.